rifle, which, from the ball being a little larger than a pea, was called a pea rifle. Jim was no favorite, and had been named Scraggs by his companions on account of his appearance. In a few minutes the lots were drawn, and the shooting began. Each hunter wiped out the barrel of his piece with his ramrod as he stepped forward. Then, placing a ball in the palm of his left hand, he drew the stopper of his powder horn with his teeth and poured out as much powder as sufficed to cover the bullet. This was the regular measure among them. Little time was lost in firing, for these men did not hang on their aim. The point of the rifle was slowly raised to the object, and, the instant the sight covered it, the ball sped to its mark. In a few minutes the nail was encircled by bullet holes, scarcely two of which were more than an inch distant from the mark, and one, fired by Joe Blunt, entered the tree close beside it. "Ah, Joe," said the major, "I thought you would have carried off the prize." "So did not I, sir," returned Blunt, with a shake of his head. "Had it been half a dollar at 100 yards, I had done better. But I never could hit the nail. It's too small to see." "That's 'cause you got no eyes," remarked Jim Scraggs, with a sneer, as he stepped forward. All tongues were now hushed, for the expected champion was about to fire. The sharp crack of the rifle was followed by a shout, for Jim had hit the nail head on the edge, and part of the bullet stuck to it. "That wins if there's no better," said the major, scarce able to conceal his disappointment. "Who comes next?" To this question Henry answered by stepping up to the line, straddling his legs, and executing preliminary movements with his rifle that seemed to indicate an intention on his part to throw the weapon bodily at the mark. He was received with a shout of mingled laughter and applause. After gazing steadily at the mark for a few seconds, a broad grin overspread his countenance, and, looking round at his companions, he said, "Ha, Miss Boys, I cannot behold the nail at all." "Can you behold the tree?" shouted a voice, when the laugh that followed this announcement had somewhat abated. "Oh, oui," replied Henry, quite coolly. "I can see him, and a goot small bit of the forest beyond." "Fire at it, then. If you hit the tree, you deserve the rifle. Leastwise, you ought to get the pup." Henry grinned again, and fired instantly, without taking aim. The shot was followed by an exclamation of surprise, for the bullet was found close beside the nail. "It's more be good luck than good shooting," remarked Jim Scraggs. "Possiblement," answered Henry modestly, as he retreated to the rear and wiped out his rifle. "Mace I have killed most of my deer by that same goot luck." "Bravo, Henry!" said Major Hope, as he passed. "You deserve to win, anyhow. Who's next?" "Dick Varley!" cried several voices. "Where's Varley? Come on, youngster, and take your shot." The youth came forward with evident reluctance. "It's of no manner o' use," he whispered to Joe Blunt as he passed. "I can't depend on my old gun." "Never give in," whispered Blunt encouragingly. Poor Varley's want of confidence in his rifle was merited, for, on pulling the trigger, the faithless lock missed fire. "Lend him another gun," cried several voices. "'Gainst the rules laid down by Major Hope," said Scraggs. "Well, so it is. Try again." Varley did try again, and so successfully, too, that the ball hit the nail on the head, leaving a portion of the lead sticking to its edge. Of course, this was greeted with a cheer, and a loud dispute began as to which was the better shot of the two. "There are others to shoot yet," cried the major. "Make way! Look out!" The men fell back, and the few hunters who had not yet fired took their shots, but without coming nearer the mark. It was now agreed that Jim Scraggs and Dick Varley, being the two best shots, should try over again, and it was also agreed that Dick should have the use of Blunt's rifle. Lots were again drawn for the first shot, and it fell to Dick, who immediately stepped out, aimed somewhat hastily, and fired. "Hit again! shouted those who had run forward to examine the mark. "Half the bullet cut off by the nail head." Some of the more enthusiastic of Dick's friends cheered lustily, but the most of the hunters were grave and silent, for they knew Jim's powers and felt that he would certainly do his best. Jim now stepped up to the line and, looking earnestly at the mark, threw forward his rifle. At that moment our friend Crusoe, tired of tormenting his mother, waddled stupidly and innocently into the midst of the crowd of men, and, in doing so, received Henry's heel and the full weight of his elephantine body on its forepaw. The horrible and electric yell that instantly issued from his agonized throat could only be compared, as Joe Blunt expressed it, to the last dying screech o' a bustin' steam biler. We cannot say that the effect was startling, for these backwoodsmen had been born and bred in the midst of alarms, and were so used to them that a "bustin' steam biler" itself, unless it had blown them fairly off their legs, would not have startled them. But the effect, such as it was sufficient to disconcert the aim of Jim Scraggs, who fired at the same instant and missed the nail by a hair's breadth. Turning round in towering wrath, Scraggs aimed a kick at the poor pup, which, had it taken effect, would certainly have terminated the innocent existence of that remarkable dog on the spot. But quick as lightning, Henry interposed the butt of his rifle, and Jim's shin met it with a violence that caused him to howl with rage and pain. "Oh, pardon me, brudder," cried Henry, shrinking back with the drollest expression of mingled pity and glee. Jim's discretion on this occasion was superior to his valor. He turned away with a coarse expression of anger and left the ground. Meanwhile the major handed the silver rifle to young Varley. "It couldn't have fallen into better hands," he said. "You'll do it credit, lad. I know that full well, and let me assure you it will never play you false. Only keep it clean, don't overcharge it, aim true, and it will never miss the mark." While the hunters crowded round Dick to congratulate him and examine the piece, he stood with a mingled feeling of bashfulness and delight at his unexpected good fortune. Recovering himself suddenly, he seized his old rifle, and, dropping quietly to the outskirts of the crowd, while the men were still busy handling and discussing the merits of the prize, went up, unobserved, to a boy of about 13 years of age, and touched him on the shoulder. "Here, Martson, you know I often said ye should have the old rifle when I was rich enough to get a new one. Take it now, lad. It's come to ye sooner than either of us expected." "Dick," said the boy, grasping his friend's hand warmly, "you're true as heart of oak. It's good of 'ee, that's a fact." "Not a bit, boy. It costs me nothin' to give away an old gun I've no use for, and's worth a little, but it makes me right glad to have the chance to do it." Marston had longed for a rifle ever since he could walk, but his prospects of obtaining one were very poor indeed at that time, and it is a question whether he did not at that moment experience as much joy in handling the old piece as his friend felt in shouldering the prize. A difficulty now occurred which had not before been thought of. This was no less than the absolute refusal of Dick Varley's canine property to follow him. Fan had no idea of changing masters without her consent being asked, or her inclination being consulted. "You'll have to tie her up for a while, I fear," said the major. "No fear," answered the youth. "Dog's nature like human nature." Saying this, he seized Crusoe by the neck, stuffed him comfortably into the bosom of his hunting shirt, and walked rapidly away with the prize rifle on his shoulder. Fan had not bargained for this. She stood irresolute, gazing now to the right, now to the left, as the major retired in one direction, and Dick with Crusoe in another. Suddenly Crusoe, who, although comfortable in body, was ill at ease in spirit, gave utterance to a melancholy howl. The mother's love instantly prevailed. For one moment she pricked up her ears at the sound, and then, lowering them, trotted quietly after her new master, and followed him to his cottage on the margin of the lake. Chapter 3